Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. So right at the beginning of the wonderful summer break, kids running, enjoying the sunshine, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, along with its Department of Justice, released a series of most wanted individuals who were guilty of committing massive amounts of fraud, whether that's wire fraud, whether that's phone and telemarketing fraud, bank fraud, whether we're talking about Medicare and Medicaid fraud, on and on ad nauseum. And two of these individuals up at the top of that list who are responsible for billions, that is with a B, billions of dollars worth of fraud, have now been caught, especially as of today. So today, the former number 2 slot, I guess you could say currently the number 1 slot, and we're going to get to why that is here in a second, has now been captured. So the guy that as of today was sitting at the top of the leaderboard as the most wanted, I hate the word fraudster, I think it doesn't sound as important as it should be, the most wanted convicted individual who defrauded millions of people for billions of dollars, Herbert Leon Kimball, has been captured. So who is this guy? What in the world does this have to do with anything? He is convicted of fraud and wanted by the FBI for his central role in a massive, you guessed it, Medicare healthcare fraud scheme. And his recent arrest follows this placement on the most wanted fraudsters list. So where does this guy come from? Because there's going to be kind of a theme tonight. Inner city people acting in the most thuggish, ridiculous, nonsensical of ways possible. And again, that's not you forcing them to act like that. That's not me forcing individuals from these environments to act like that, but they act like this all the same. Born May 12th, 1966 in Chicago, Illinois, Kimball, about 5'8", 250 pounds, described as a black male, with prior work as a telemarketer and movie producer, orchestrated a sophisticated operation from 2014 to March of 2019. He ran offshore call centers, primarily in Manila, Philippines, that aggressively marketed unnecessary orthopedic braces, durable medical equipment, for example, to Medicare beneficiaries, often elderly individuals. So when you were told that there are telemarketing schemes and that it's all coming from, for example, India and Pakistan, of which there are umpteen thousands upon thousands that do come from this region, there are homegrown individuals right here in the United States that will absolutely call you on the phone or even outsource the calling you on the phone, trying to steal every single dime of your money. They don't just have to run for office or sit in a law office. This individual is responsible for an estimated $1.2 billion in fraudulent Medicare charges, affecting thousands of victims. It diverted critical funds from legitimate healthcare needs. So what would this guy do? He would cold call or advertise to persuade seniors to request braces for pain relief. And then he would use these questionable kind of fake telemedicine consultations that frequently lacked any proper medical necessity. So he would try to organize, you and Dr. Whatchamacallit to sit down, and the doctor would go, yes, I can see that you need all of the braces. Really, you should just be in traction 24/7. He would also sell prescriptions to DME suppliers who then billed Medicare. And at this point, you have to wonder, this is not related at all to the hundreds of Medicaid and Medicare fraud cases that we've talked about here in the United States, in places like Minnesota or in Ohio, or hospice care fraud in California. But at some point, you have to ask the question, why, oh why, over the last couple of years, have I seen Republicans, for example, when they said that Medicare or Medicaid needed to be reformed, making the bizarre, insane case that those Republicans are just racist and they just want to shove grandma off a cliff, as the Obama administration suggested during the Mitt Romney election. It's truly, truly bizarre. So in April of 2019, Kimball pled guilty in U.S. District Court of South Carolina to multiple charges: conspiracy to defraud the United States, false claims, mail fraud, wire fraud, healthcare fraud, and offering, you guessed it, kickbacks and bribes. He failed to appear for his sentencing hearing on August 27th, 2024. Now, you may be scratching your head and saying, Tony, something sounds wrong there. Why is this dude, who pled guilty in the U.S. District Court in South Carolina to multiple charges in April of 2019, to all of these various varieties and frauds. This guy just so happens not to have had a sentencing hearing until August 27th of 2024, and he didn't show up. So where was this guy? There is a system in the United States that is especially pushed by the mayors of big blue cities, like Brandon Johnson of Chicago, for instance. Well, you can't just jail people. It's so violent and racist and terrible. Well, it just turns out, maybe actually throwing people in jail and giving them not just a speedy trial, but a speedy sentencing keeps them from running away and leaving the United States. Now, Kimball was added to the FBI's inaugural Most Wanted Fraudsters list in early June of this year with a reward of up to $150,000 for information leading to his arrest and conviction. He was captured in the Philippines shortly after, about 4 days after the list's launch, through FBI efforts and international cooperation because, you may recall, that, for example, Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio have been doing the Lord's work at establishing decent, solid partnerships between the United States and the Philippines, between the United States and Malaysia, the United States and Indonesia, the United States and South Korea, and on and on. Now, we'll talk about foreign policy stuff on that side a little bit later, but there are some individuals, as the aforementioned Rubio and Hegseth would apply, who are doing quite a lot to accomplish making the United States stronger on the world stage. That's not a universal in the Trump administration. Now, I told you that this was number 2. A couple of days ago, Saeed Abdullahi Ereg, who was also referred to as a Minneapolis deli and grocery owner, if you're talking to like Senator Chris Van Hollen, for instance, Saeed Abdullahi Ereg is the most directly relevant other high-profile FBI fraud-related arrest in the last 2 weeks. Now, this guy was arrested, or he was surrendered himself to the FBI on June 10th, 2026, at the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. So this guy showed up to fly somewhere else and realized that there was no way he was just going to pull a catch me if you can and pretend to be the jump seat pilot because he didn't look enough like Leonardo DiCaprio, and turned himself in then to the feds. I love it. I surrendered to the FBI. He didn't just show up and say, hey, it's me. He drove to the airport with intentions of fleeing the country. Anyway, that was the original number 1. So his charges: conspiracy to commit wire fraud. So he had the conspiracy, then he committed the wire fraud, and money laundering, because, Somali piracy and fraud is alive and well. So this is one of the guys who allegedly participated in the Feeding Our Future fraud during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, he, by himself, received more than $4.2 million directly in federal nutrition program funds. And then, a bunch of foreign accounts and a lavish lifestyle and all of that other stuff. So here in the United States and abroad, the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Justice under Todd Blanche. Now, again, I think that Kash Patel as well, especially in some of his assignments that have been sent down the list by Todd Blanche, are doing excellent work to get some of this stuff across the finish line and actually produce results. Some of these investigations I had from Pam Bondi's time as the Attorney General. Again, some of them were in process for a while. However, it must be made very clear that Todd Blanche has ordered the Federal Bureau of Investigation and several other joint operations within the Department of Justice to carry out a series of not just strongly worded letters, not just another congressional hearing, but instead something that is extremely useful to the American people, going and getting the people and bringing them back for accountability, for trial, not for way down the line, someday maybe kind of who knows style sentencing hearings. Now, there is some other major international news that I want to get to right away. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, may be well and truly cooked. So according to the Times and the Sunday Times of London, Andy Burnham won a decisive victory in the Makerfield by-election, which sets the stage for a major leadership challenge. So Burnham, who won more than 50% of the vote, warned the Labour Party, that's Keir Starmer's party, that they face a final chance to change. And you say, what does that have to do with Keir Starmer? After this insane report came out from Rupert Lowe's team that alleges and clearly details decades of abuse by foreign migrants, especially those of the Pakistani Islamic group, of British women Again, the numerous cases of molestation, of grooming, of gang raping, horrible and horrific situation that we covered last week. Keir Starmer is directly alleged in the report to have let a bunch of individuals back when he worked as a prosecutor who were accused, and there was significant and sufficient evidence to convict these individuals who had participated in this grooming, assault, sexual assault, gang raping activity. He let them off with warnings or small fines or essentially parking tickets. And don't do it again, isn't it? And that was basically it. Keir Starmer's in significant trouble because the Labour Party is hemorrhaging over in the United Kingdom. Truly, truly hemorrhaging. And deservedly so. Now, to be clear here, the actual statement in the Times article, there's a lot of media rumor that says, oh, he's planning on, resigning in disgrace. That's not what the actual article says right here. According to the article, while the Times doesn't report on whether or not he's deciding on resigning in disgrace, he is sitting down with his family over the weekend, recognizing pressure to weigh up his future. Now, there are different media reports that cite that Keir Starmer, while saying he's going to run in any leadership contest after a potential rival, Andy Burnham, won in the Makerfield by-election, which secured him a parliamentary seat with 54.8% of the vote. Keir Starmer says that he's still ready to fight. He's still out there. He's going to fight for the Labour Party because he believes in himself.
Now that Andy has won, which is really important, really good, he's a huge asset to us, then now will inevitably be a Manchester mayoralty by-election starting straight away. So it's important that we pull together for that. But if there is a contest, just to be clear with you, then yes, I will run, I will stand, and I've said repeatedly, I'm not going to walk away from that.
Yeah, not good. Not exactly good at all. Now, according to the Financial Times, the UK Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander has just overtly called on Keir Starmer to step down. Because if this continues, there is going to be nothing left of the UK Labour Party. I know, my lips to God's ears, for sure. The United Kingdom's Labour Party, who ran with all of the migrants all of the time, screw everyone else, we need to import as many people as possible, and they are far more important than anything else. I mean, this has truly taken over the entire party. To have your own transport secretary come out and say, mind the gap, get on the tube and leave. I mean, there is more resistance now to Keir Starmer within his own party than when Boris Johnson walked into the ocean never to be seen again. It's truly bizarre to watch. Some of the protests and the riots are not stopping. And by the way, when I say that this migrant situation, this importing all of the foreigners possible and honoring every single culture except for British culture, protecting every single right except for the rights of those native to the United Kingdom, Irishmen, Scotsmen, the Welsh, the English. Well, I mean, when you have the United Kingdom Refugee Council, who over the last couple of years literally used little girls in school uniforms as young as 12 years old to encourage migrant men to come to the United Kingdom. I mean, when they say, oh, we had no part in this whole grooming scandal, we had nothing to do with it, and then there are videos that are being made using little girls as props in schoolgirl uniforms to say, hey, if you're a migrant, you come on over here. It's sick and it's twisted and it's truly morally abhorrent.
Shemai. Hello and welcome to Wales. We understand being a refugee isn't easy. They go through so much.
Fleeing your country is difficult, but Wales wants to help you feel welcome.
The Welsh Refugee Council is here to help you.
Wales is seen as a nation of sanctuary.
Why did you need to get little girls, preteens and young teenage girls, to advise those coming to the United Kingdom from wherever to come to the UK? And then by the way, the rest of the video are these young women advertising all of the various services, all of it. All of the various migrant services that can, come in, flood in, etc. Why? So that the individuals who are going to come to the United Kingdom and likely participate in pedophilia and hebephilia, which is the attraction to teenage women, the Labour Party has dug that grave with both hands on the shovel, passionately and excitedly. Now, to be clear, Keir Starmer has now had over 20 different protesters arrested and charged that showed distress and anger over Henry Novak's murder. And none have been sentenced yet. Their sentencings are scheduled for this week at the Southampton Crown Court.
And let me be clear, we will ensure anyone found engaging in disorder meets the full force of the law, as we have done before.
Unless they happen to be men that are grooming and going after young girls. It's truly insane that this has been allowed to propagate as long as possible. But the kind of social justice, middle-aged, leftist, white woman preening that I guess is just everyone over in the United Kingdom's political class has truly ruined entire societies. The academic tuttery that says, well, you can't just, condemn cultures that so uncivilized, who have never actually been to any of the places that these cultures are present and alive. And if you can call something this truly sick well, they're very alive and well. So, finally, last but not least in this particular instance, Keir Starmer is also being cut out from the international community. He wasn't showing up for meetings this last week with the G7, and no one cared. It's like, let's just get started without him anyway, because it's not as though he matters.
British team, well, do you know where Keir is? We wait for him? Are you sure? Thank you, Jonathan. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, no one. No one there is, should we wait for Keir Starmer and the people that he is throwing to the wolves? No, we shall go ahead and continue. So he's been ostracized. Last but certainly not least, there was a bill put forward in the UK Parliament to essentially make incest, first cousin marriages, illegal in the United Kingdom. Now, as of right now, first cousin marriages are already legal in the UK. Of course, by Labour Party law. But the government under Prime Minister Keir Starmer blocked the members' bill to ban them. So again, there was a practice that's already currently on the books. And a lot of individuals who are of the migrant population from third world countries that are primarily Islamic into the UK, they marry first cousins. And there was an aspect of that also comes from grooming and living in the same household as the individual who is at a young age, who is to be basically sold into slavery at a young age. And the Labour Party blocked it because, you don't understand the cultural importance of marrying your cousin.
A marriage between first cousins carries significant health issues, many of which aren't even knowable until post-birth.
Now, to be clear, the reasons that first cousin marriage should be outlawed, before you even get to there are some objective issues with health. Obviously, inbreeding didn't exactly work out very well for the Habsburgs. The primary reason is because it's wrong. It's morally wrong. That's it. You can start there. It doesn't matter if, it's not hurting anybody, because there are some comments by some interesting British individuals, of course, air quotes included, suggesting that, they're not, you're not being asked to marry your first cousin. That's not the point. The point is that it is morally wrong.
In practice, generation after generation, there is a significant multiplier effect. In addition, the real impacts for the openness of our society and women's rights in our country are also significant. After all, there are significant dynamics in sharing a same set of grandparents. On Friday, this government has a choice to let my bill go through to ban first cousin marriage to committee stage. Will the Prime Minister think again before instructing his whips to block this legislation?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've taken our position on that bill. Thank you.
That completes Prime Minister.
Yes, excellent. Meaning, no. Just keep on going. So again, Keir Starmer may resign as soon as this weekend. I sure hope that he does. And then if he doesn't, I've made this perfectly clear before. But at some point, the United Kingdom is going to have to take matters into their own hand. And if they have members of the parliament who have just so decided that they don't care about their real and true constituents, the IRA has done more for less. I'll just leave that there. That is going to be again, the United Kingdom has a chance to be saved without mass amounts of violence. But this is its last chance to do so. And so taking the level-headed approach and tossing some of these individuals out of office would be a very, very good thing while there is still time to do so. Now, here over in the United States, there are some individuals that are trying to do the exact same thing as the Labour Party over in the UK. For example, Mayor Zoran Mamdani, who took his time amid the Knicks parade and celebration to go do a little celebratory rally for a friend of his, where he made it very clear that the issue is not whether or not you should be here in the United States. It's that once you get here to the United States, legally, illegally, how much money should we be giving you to stay here?
And when you are at those polls, when you are in that booth, and it's just you and your ballot and that incredible pen from the Board of Elections, it is a sacred moment. It is you alone with democracy. And it is then that every New Yorker answers a question. What the other side wants that question to be is, which of your neighbors are you most willing to sell out? What the other side wants that question to be is, which leaders of today are you willing to delay until tomorrow? They asked that the tenant of 40 years vote against the tenant of 1 year. That the divide is between those.
No. See, the issue is not whether someone has lived in New York for 1 year or has lived in New York for 40 years. Again, it's the very flowery kind of Obama-style language where it's a beautiful prose. The tenant of 40 years versus the tenant of 1 year. No, someone who comes to the United States, and we're going to talk about this in the next segment, from, let's say, Japan, who is here for 1 year, versus a person, let's say, from an inner city culture environment who acts like a lot of individuals who have lived in New York for a long time. Americans' preference as to who is their neighbor just so happens to be the immigrant from Japan. It is about culture. It is about how you carry yourself. It is about how you act. It is about how you behave, how you assimilate. The issue is not whether or not someone is an immigrant, although yes, increasingly, immigrant just means someone who comes from primarily third world places and imbibes and brings with them third world culture that does not and cannot assimilate and is not compatible at all with the United States. But this is his frame. He said, what you really need to do, the reason that the people are getting here and they're acting up is because we're not giving them enough money, because that's the left-wing answer to all of this.
Those who have gone through decades of political transformation and those who have joined our movement as soon as they were of voting age. They ask questions that sustain power for those who have it under the guise of rewarding those who struggle under it. I do not believe that is the question you must in fact answer in that booth.
By the way, it is. So what he just said is that the right wing of this country runs by saying that those who are poor in the United States and those who live in the inner city will be better off when crime is cracked down on, when violent illegal immigrants are captured and deported. And by the way, the answer to that is yes. Since the Trump administration deployed the National Guard to Washington, D.C., remember, after the National Guard was on the streets, they had all of these interviews. You actually had members of the left-wing media, the podcastosphere on the left especially, who would run away. Don Lemon would go up to people and say, so what do you think about the National Guard being here? And he would expect this sweet little old black lady from downtown to say, I really don't like the National Guard here, and it's terrible, and I'm terrified. But she said, I tell you what, I like them National Guardsmen right here. I like them. It's safe. I can go out for a walk. I can go to the grocery store. My grandbabies can come over. I'll never forget that interview. And what did Don Lemon do? He basically said, okay, and then he walked away as quick as he could. Because the truth of the matter is that, yes, when you enforce your nation's laws, that people of all social classes, of all colors, and of all creeds, at least those whose cultures are compatible with the United States, are in fact safe. It is one of the reasons why, for example, since we mentioned Japan, we're going to talk about them again in the next segment, it is why Japan has been so hardline against allowing immigration into their country. Because once you allow individuals in and you start giving them everything, it turns out that they don't wean, they don't assimilate, they don't take upon values. And again, this is the thing that Mamdani doesn't realize, or if he does realize, he's just doing it because, again, this is that Marxist ideology. And very likely so, given who he quotes a little bit after this. But we'll watch his answer to this, because he thinks that the right wing is wrong when they say we should get violent criminals off the streets. Again, Mamdani, who allowed homeless people who would have been shuttered by the police off of the streets, he allowed over 15, 17, 20 homeless people to just die to exposure who are drugged out. Anywho, that's a small aside. Mamdani says, well, the real answer is just give them lots of money. Give me money. Money me. Here you go.
In the city I know, in the city I love, the question is not when did you arrive? The question is, can you afford to stay?
Okay. The question is not when you arrive. The question is, can you afford to stay? The answer to this, for all of American history, all the way back, by the way, to the 1600s, when America was fighting for its life on its own as the colonies, especially Virginia and Maryland, because the English, they were engaged in a civil war at the time. So we were kind of, it was, you're on your own territory for the colonies, the few that were here. And the biggest issue of the 1600s in the United States was a massive labor shortage. And so the question of this continent has always been not whether or not you can afford to be here. The question has always been, are you willing to work? Again, it is the reason that Jamestown was saved in Virginia from complete and utter starvation, like the lost Roanoke colony before it. The way that they were saved is because a policy was put down. If you do not work, you do not eat. The Old Testament philosophy. And when that is the procedure here in this country, and obviously taking care of our own poor and sick and the widow and the fatherless who are already here, you don't just import tons of individuals who claim to be the poor and the infirm and the handicapped who often turn out not to be whatsoever. And you don't allow people just to ride scot-free. That's not charity, that's enabling. The same with students. You see, one of the reasons I'm asked constantly as a former teacher why I actually think that schools are passing students out of schools who can't even pronounce basic 2 or 3 syllable words. And the answer is because it's considered a good thing to just pass someone along, because after all, if you don't just pass them along to the next grade, forget if they have the skills to compete or to survive, to feed themselves. They're worried about social stigma, and that's Mamdani right there. Oh, it's the social stigma. You can't afford to live here. You do not have a right to be in New York City. You don't. And the idea that you are owed things as kind of a culture, very, very different. And you can see this contrast played out rather starkly right now in New York City, which we're going to cover in just a second, and those visiting for the World Cup. We got to reset the commercial clock. We're going to go right back out and come back in. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Big show. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
So Mamdani gets up in front of New York. And again, not only does he suggest that we need to pay for everyone coming to the United States, he also gets out and says truly insane things to the New Yorkers, such as that they need to honor Daria Liza Alvilia Chevalier, who is an open communist Marxist, for fighting on behalf of an open terrorist sympathizer, Mahmoud Khalil. Again, the framing and the place of interest matters here, because what's going on in the rest of New York would probably be a little bit more important. But again, where is the focus in these kind of governments, like we just saw with Keir Starmer in the United Kingdom? The focus is not on the safety issues of those in the United Kingdom. The focus is on preventing the feelings of Islamic migrants from being hurt. It is the exact same thing in New York City.
Since she was a teenager, Dottie has organized her community and reunited families illegally separated by ICE.
Not illegally separated by ICE, by the way.
That includes her classmate, Mahmoud Khalil.
Yeah. So this is what they're cheering on. What's actually going on in New York? Well, I just got back from there. So I was in New York City this last week for a CNN Newsnight hit, for a couple of other network hits and meetings and things in the city. And what happened? Well, a couple of things. So first of all, there was this big, huge New York Knicks parade. And at the New York Knicks parade, you had a couple of young individuals run out into the intersection of 44th Street and Broadway and just, start firing guns into the air to cause a mass panic and a stampede. You see people running away, starting to stampede because it's terrifying. just to cause chaos and panic, because that is the celebratory nature that has come out of some of these events. And I sat across from a lady over on CNN by the name of Tara, or Tara. And during one of the commercial breaks, while the crowd was away, we at the table discussed the violence in near us at the CNN studios about the post Knicks game. And those at the table, not just Scott Jennings and I, but also some others at the table. For example, the lady next to me from the Bulwark, they were concerned. The Libertarian as well at the table, there was concern because this is not good behavior. There's no condemnation of this on this from the city level. There's nothing. Mamdani is busy running around patting himself on the back and praising Islamic migrant stuff. So what to do? Well, the lady who didn't exactly agree with us, this Tara individual, told the table that, well, I mean, this just happens. It's just like Philly doing. It just happens. Just because something might be more commonplace does not, in fact, make it permissible. And there seems to be this idea on the left that heading towards the midterms, they're just going to ignore the growing violence from the American left, especially out of the inner city. Now, I was fairly close by when these shots rang out. I was just heading out of a Newsmax hit. And I was surrounded by people who were streaming down the stairs into the subway to escape. What they were terrified of was a mass shooting down in New York. Although this is not the only incident that occurred. Of course, we have all of these instances like today. There was this video is taken of a interesting looking individual. Interesting looking individual. The New York Sanitation Department released some special commemorative garbage cans to celebrate the Knicks. And so the streets were decorated with these garbage cans. So what's the first thing on a lot of New Yorkers' minds? Go steal the garbage can. And there are videos of people that are running out and that are grabbing the garbage can and just like this lady, I think, dumping the garbage out on the street. And then what do you hear people in the background that are cheering her on? There's a picture of this individual later on the subway holding the trash can and smiling proudly. Just again, I thought the left was against all of the littering. But dumping out the trash in order to get your hands on a commemorative garbage can for the city street, it's just embarrassing. It's truly embarrassing. Do I actually? Yeah. So there's also they've already released the actual trash can. You can purchase one yourself. It's $168 USD. Yeah. So if you really wanted to, you can go buy one. There are people who finance their burritos and their DoorDash orders and their Uber Eats with Klarna. I think you can probably, if you're desperate enough to steal a garbage can on the streets of New York and dump garbage out all over everywhere, you could probably just go afford and buy one yourself. But again, that's not the idea. We've never criticized the acts of theft in New York City. Not last at all. After the New York Knicks won, they did things like, for example, setting a school bus on fire. And there's terror in the eyes of the New York City Department of Education bus driver who's panicking and begging people to stop. But the crowd has to do violence because, it's just what you do. I mean, it's just, that's not the important question. Fascinating behavior. So he's hitting that with a Razor scooter. Not, interesting for sure. By the way, where are the cops? Why, that's a really great question. Gee, howdy. I have no idea. Where are the cops? So there's the guy right there in the black Nike baseball cap. A guy just trying to do his job, just trying to work. All right. He's begging people, please stop, and they won't do it. They keep destroying the bus. They eventually set that bus on fire. And again, what you will notice is that were there black individuals in that clip that were part of the violence? Yep. Was there a white guy that was dressed in the inner city culture who was also out there destroying the bus? Yep. And the bus driver who was begging people to please stop was black. The point of the story is not about the race. It is all about the culture. The culture. But again, in this country, at this time, there are individuals who find it far more important to suggest that really all of this is just about the race and the terrible and the awfulness. And by the way, this kind of just thuggish, barbaric culture, even when individuals' lives are saved. So there was an individual who was passed out due to some kind of what was probably a fentanyl overdose. And this individual passed out on like the roof of a subway stairwell platform, I believe, or either that or a kiosk platform kind of a thing. And individuals essentially crowded around, and the cop is just standing there doing very little, because this is just normal behavior in New York. People were not getting out of the ways for ambulances. I mean, but that's been a thing in New York City for a long, I mean, good Lord, that's been a Seinfeld joke back into the 90s. I mean, just this inner city behavior. And so anyway, some individuals did actually get up onto the roof and revived him with Narcan. And what is the first thing that the guy who has been revived, his life saved, do? He tries to sexually assault the woman who just saved his life.
You gotta get up, bro. Hey, man. You gotta get up, bro. Pass out in his vomit, bro. I swear to God.
So there's an officer just looks and go, okay, okay. Because what have the officers been told to do? Stand there and do nothing. Stand there and do nothing. There's people ringing up, hey, there is someone who is passed out on his vomit. He's dying. Where have we seen cops be told to do absolutely nothing before? Oh, gee, yeah, wow. Like outside of Delaney Hall in New Jersey or in Los Angeles or in the United Kingdom. My. I'd say that's rather strange and curious and stuff. So anyway, the individual's essentially, he says, F it, I'm just going to go and we're going to go help the guy.
They don't want to be there no more. I'm going to go up there. I swear to God. I'm not trying to get, I'm just going to climb up there. I swear to God.
They're going to tell you to get off.
Well, then he's going to die. Oh, no. Really following the rules out here. I'm sorry, man. That guy's passed out. That guy's passed out, man.
Oh, the cop's like, no.
You got to.
He climbs up there.
You got to get up, bro. Hey, man.
Drug overdose.
You got to get up, bro. Hey, man, you got to get up, bro. Come on. If anybody can actually help. Thanks, man.
You still have the ambulance. You have the plate.
You're medical? Okay, get over here. Get over here.
A young lady who shows up claiming to be medical, and she administers Narcan.
It's on the poster.
Hey, you got it, bro. You got it, bro. Hey, we're good. Thank you. You got it, bro.
You can see her prepping the Narcan. Administers it, and she saves his life. So he's awake now. Now, watch what he tries to do the first thing as soon as he's awake.
Let's go! Come on.
So you can't really see it because he's like leaning forward. He's trying to kiss her.
You gotta get down.
Stop.
It's like, stop. Like he immediately starts trying to cop a feel and kiss her. He says, well, Tony, how can you really see anything from that angle? Oh, you wanted another angle? Here you go. So there's the young lady, she's trying to save him. Now he's getting up, and he immediately, look at him, he starts groping her, tries to hug her, and then pull her in for a kiss, and she's like, dude, stop. The crowd is like, what on earth is going on? So New York, alive and well. You would expect something along these lines from Mamdani. Nope, just social workers and good times and fun. It truly is wild. By the way, shout out, I do want to make this clear. The first Instagram clip there is from Peter Shrevden, as was tagged on the clip. I looked around a little bit. I couldn't find who the other individual angle is from. If we're sent that later, like where that actual clip came from, we will tag that in the show's description. We really want to make sure that people, again, who have this kind of stuff, that they get the credit. Now, this is juxtaposed with the individuals from other countries that are visiting the United States for the World Cup. So the World Cup, I mean, the amount of public support from the entire world for the United States World Cup, as a reminder, Qatar had to build stadiums, and it was a really rough experience. And the United States, again, because we have high school stadiums. Shout out to the Newcastle High School Fieldhouse in Indiana, or the couple of really huge stadiums that they have down in Texas. Our college stadiums, of course, are way bigger than many professional stadiums over in Europe. It's just, we're a country built for hosting these kind of events. And the people who have come over, again, as you've seen covered endlessly ad nauseum, are Europeans, Asians, Africans, Australians and Oceanics who have come out here to the United States and who have had a phenomenal time because they realize that everything they've been told by people like Keir Starmer about the United States, things that they've been told about by, for example, Zoran Mamdani, is a lie, and that the United States is freaking incredible. However, just because you're coming to the United States doesn't inherently make you good or bad. And as I've said before, there are cultures that are objectively better than others because of how they carry themselves. And one of the things that's been getting a lot of attention in the last couple of days are the visitors from Japan, who, for example, have been cleaning up all kinds of trash as a Japanese culture is. They carry around garbage bags, they carry around knapsacks, because in Japan you were expected to keep things clean. Now in Singapore, they do the same thing. I mean, if you spit on the sidewalk in Singapore, I hope you enjoy your jail cell. But in Japan, that is a cultural expectation.
Culture, but it's like respect for everything, respect for the players, supporters, and also for the stadium.
This video is from FIFA 2026 account, by the way.
We're kind of honored to be here, so we don't want to make the mess and then leave it.
We are honored to be here, and therefore we do not want to make a mess and then leave it. So cultural crosspoint here, although I don't do anywhere near as a good job. I was in a lot of guest green rooms over the weekend. And one thing that, again, just how all of us, I would guarantee all of us were raised. If you are a guest in an area, you'd work really hard not to make a mess. And you might, in fact, be embarrassed if you go to a certain place that you're a guest and you leave a mess. I mean, there are cultural memes galore in the United States on the fears of, for example, being at a house party and then something happens in the bathroom and all of a sudden there's a major plumbing issue and there's like panic. Even our jokes are built around the idea of giving a certain amount of respect when you are a guest somewhere else. That is how immigration in this country used to be. It is why people learned the language. It is why people participated in the culture. And there are individuals, some who I talked with. I actually sat down in a very weird kind of anecdotal case. I was one of my Uber drivers' last drop-offs for the day. And we talked a little bit on the ride, and we ended up going to grab some gelato because like all the frozen yogurt places have just been replaced with gelato. It's like that's the thing. And so I ended up sitting down and talking a little bit, and I chatted with him about, where he'd come from. He came from Kenya. And we talked a little bit, and he actually shared a little bit of his testimony, how he, as a Christian, always wanted to come to the United States. And he had very, very little, if any, accent at all. And I asked him about it. And his response to me was, I've tried really hard to get rid of that. I said, why? He said, because I don't want people to think of me as a Kenyan. I want people to think of me as an American. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the point. That is an excellent thing. Now, another culture two other cultures, I should say, who have been phenomenal, especially coming to the United States, would be the Scots, who are having just one heck of a time over in Boston. Now, I fear right now that they're not having necessarily as good a time in the game, at least. Yeah, they're down in the 87th minute. They are down 0-1. Against Morocco. And it's not going too well. And it was scored very early. I think it was in the first 2 minutes of the game. And that's really rough. The Australians have also been excellent. I've run into a few of the Australian visitors here. We're thrilled for those individuals that are here because those who are here from Scotland and those who are here from Ireland, from Scotland and Australia, they are going and enjoying American culture and they are being respectful. They are having a good time. That is excellent. I love to see it. And even in all of the posts, for example, the Australians, there's been a kind of back and forth battle on social media between the United States responding to what they think that Australia's national anthem should be, and the Australians, what they think the United States national anthem should be, and the United States thinking that Men at Work's Land Down Under should be their national anthem, and they think that ours should be Free Bird. There's a good argument to be made for that. That kind of good camaraderie, that good rivalry, that's an excellent thing. And that game today, by the way, between the United States and Australia was incredible. This has been a beautiful year for the United States. So transparency here. I played soccer in high school and in college. So I went to a tiny Christian high school. There wasn't football and all they had was soccer. And so I was usually in high school, my first couple years, sitting the bench in part because I got carded for being too physical on the turf. What are you going to do? So, I like soccer. I'm sorry. It's soccer, not football. But anywho, football or whatever. It's soccer. God bless it. The American team has been phenomenal this year. Even without their captain, the U.S. team has been incredible. Unfortunately, there are people, you guessed the kind of individuals who are saying it, who have decided that the most important thing about the team this year is how black it is. So the Knicks won the title for the NBA. They won the championship. And Whoopi Goldberg is really, really worried about black men going to represent black people to go to the White House. And now we have an article from The Athletic. So again, the Athletic is the sports section of the New York Times. And I quote, "Half of the U.S. men's national team is black." After decades of overwhelmingly white teams, the makeup of this team is powerful, writes Henry Bushnell. And I'm not joking. Henry Bushnell, I don't actually have his I don't have his picture loaded into the system. Henry Bushnell looks like the most basic, lame Pete Buttigieg, James Tallarico knockoff white dude that there is. Why is the color makeup? Why are you sitting there with an abacus and going, okay, let's see, that's 6 black people, and that's 2 mixed people, almost said the other M word there. I mean, and then there's a couple of Hispanic people or whatever, we're Latinx people. And why are we doing that? Why? Do you want to know what the greatest thing about the men's hockey team has been over watching U.S. men's hockey over the last couple of, last couple of years, but especially the last couple of months? I have no idea the racial makeup of the team. What I do know is that if another country boos our national anthem, our guys beat the ever-living crap out of them. I like that. That's American. I don't care. If I am forced to sit down, if I'm forced to sit down and watch a WNBA game, I don't care about the color makeup of the team. What I care about is that if someone from the Chicago Sky gets up there and roughs up Caitlin Clark, then I expect to see, no matter what color they are, 2 or 3 of the other ladies on the Fever rough up the person on the Chicago Sky who decided to act like the players of the Chicago Sky do. That's what I'm looking for. Camaraderie is far more important, but there are individuals right here and right now who are deciding to make the entire existence of their being nonsense, violence, and personal grievance. So one little more side by side that I wanted to show before we cut over to commercial. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, you're not really going to hear very much here of interest to you. But on the live stream here, what you'll see is the side by side again of visitors to the United States from Japan and how they're acting versus a lot of, and I know there's a lot of Knicks fans who are embarrassed by their teammates. I love the Eagles, so I get it. I mean, I've never lived in Philly. I love the Eagles. So you feel a little secondhand embarrassment. I understand it. But a lot of individuals in New York, we shall say. Here's the side by side. Such culture. I mean, yeah. We're going to swing out to the commercial break real quick, reset that clock here at 7:55 p.m. Eastern on June the 19th. We'll be back in a second. Don't go anywhere. Lots more show, and it's only going to get better. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back. Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal. Now, we've got some court news for you, but there's a news story that's getting picked up, I should say. Some of the national outlets are trying to run this story on this beautiful Friday here, June the 19th, that you see the Washington, D.C. reflecting pool between the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial. See, originally the story was, it's full of algae. Again, on Tuesday night, I was on with CNN Newsnight, and there was this big question, the algae, because again, there was algae in there was residual algae in the pipes in the inflow of water. And any body of water that is stagnant, that does not have a definite inflow and outflow, otherwise known as it's stagnant, and not properly aerated, is... I'm revealing my Midwesternism there by saying aerated. You know what I'm talking about, fellow fishermen there. Anywho, any water that's not properly moving and grooving, it's going to get algae. And so anywho, the United States government, under the direction of not just the President of the United States, but also the Washington, D.C. and the National Park Service and things, they went to go clean up the Lincoln Memorial. And it was solved in a day. Now, there were protests, how dare you remove the algae? So leftist environmentalists are, really never missing a day there at all. But that aside, that wasn't enough because we were expecting all of this complaining coverage about the United States and how awful DC is and things. And a media story that's been running around on a couple of outlets is that the reflecting pool is already peeling. And that's really strange because, again, the idea is to say that Trump is really incompetent and he's really dumb and that he's going to do a really cheap, terrible job. That's the joke, right? That's the idea. No, there are individuals who are so desperate, so desperate for America to look bad right here and right now. They are actively out vandalizing. Here is Emily Miller. Emily Miller is an independent journalist who has been covering kind of the entire transformation of several DC properties. Check it out.
A man jumped in the reflecting pool today with all these crowds around, cut out a huge piece of the blue sealant, and tried to get away, but he was arrested.
Police caught the suspect. Look at that huge chunk of sealant that is gone. That wide swath, cutting away the sealant. Again, why? What's the reason for doing this? It's just because they hate the country and they hate anyone who loves the country. It truly is that simple. Hatred of Donald Trump. Again, don't get me wrong. We are going to reach a point in the show where I'm going to offer a couple of criticisms of the President of the United States, not, just calling what I call the balls and strikes as I see them. Going to the scoreboard here. But if you hate Donald Trump so much that you are going down to national monuments and participating in not just, a little scritch and scratch over the walls of a monument, which is still is bad, tagging graffiti, it's bad thuggish inner city behavior. You're cutting chunks out of the national monument? You barbaric heathen, what the heck's wrong with you? Your parents must weep every year on your birthday. I hope they get sympathy cards. I mean, it's so there are individuals showing up with pitchforks. This is continued. Also, according to Nick Sodor here, last night, U.S. Park Police detained a suspicious man carrying a pitchfork and a bucket. Now, normally, if you're carrying like a pitchfork, maybe a tiki torch, and something with like a white hood, you're either working for the Lincoln Project or the Southern Poverty Law Center, or running for Senate in Maine. But that all said, in this case, this guy carrying a pitchfork and a bucket around the Lincoln Memorial reflection pool, the U.S. Park Police ran out and detained him because there was also an 8647 inscription written or like scratched into the pool sealant. It's just the behavior. It's so just uselessly thuggish. So here were the park police showing up and detaining this man, this large whale of a man. Showing up, I mean, I get justice saved. I mean, I guess, yeah, you're really quite the hero. So there are several other outlets out there who are currently getting roasted. For example, the Washingtonian is an outlet over in DC that says, yes, the blue paint is peeling off of the reflecting pool, just like naturally peeling. It's naturally coming up. Our photographer went to the Lincoln Memorial. This is what we saw. No. As a bunch of tradesmen pointed out, and then a bunch of influencers and journalists, reposted and retweeted to high heaven, that kind of industrial sealant doesn't just like pop up and then, float away into the breeze. Like child's finger painting on glass. No, Simple Simon. Don't be dumb. You don't have to do this. You really do not have to do this. So what are we doing now? Well, now the National Guard has to stand there among some of their other, patrolling and standing in DC and protect it. because people have decided, you know what, vandalizing DC monuments right before we get to the 4th of July is the thing to do. Again, I personally don't recommend it, but alas. Before we get to the incredible revelations yesterday from Tulsi Gabbard, former director of national intelligence. Now she has left her post right before finishing there. I do want to get to an important court update. So just in today, actually right before the show, a federal judge has rejected former President Joe Biden's bid to block the Department of Justice from releasing redacted audio recordings and transcripts from special counsel Robert Hur's investigation to the Oversight Project and the Heritage Foundation. So a little bit ago, the Oversight Project, obviously we've had on Mike Howell and his excellent team, and then of course the Heritage Foundation, they filed a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act request. Now that is pronounced FOIA. I know there are some very illiterate individuals like Candace Owens who have no idea how to pronounce words that those of us who can read do. Anyway, the Freedom of Information Act request, the way it works is you say, hey, you have these public documents, you have these public recordings, they are on file, I know they're there, please give them to me as an act of transparency and accountability. And the Biden administration at the time, who had, again, allowed Robert Hur to come in and interview Joe Biden, there were suggestions that there were recordings that were available to Robert Hur of Joe Biden talking to the guy writing his memoirs, which is when Joe Biden may have made it very clear he knowingly kept classified documents, which Trump was being targeted for at the time. And because Biden had kept these documents, it looked like Biden was far more guilty than Trump ever was regarding classified documents. And then Robert Hur ended up coming before the country and saying, look, yeah, he's very, very guilty. He clearly did the stuff that you're not allowed to do. And I've heard audio that he knew exactly what he was doing, but he's an old man now, bumping into things and lying dead on Rehoboth Beach. He doesn't sniff kids like he used to. And so I think he's too old to stand trial. Now, some of the comments pointed out rather properly, I'll say, that, you know, if Biden was too feeble to stand trial, why all of a sudden is he not too feeble to file a motion for the DOJ to prevent them from releasing these records the American people absolutely have a right to have access to, especially, again, the Oversight Project. Now, this particular judge rejected Biden's bid to block the DOJ from releasing these redacted audio recordings and transcripts is Judge Dabney Langhorne Friedrich. She's an American attorney and jurist, currently serving as the United States District Court Judge of the District Court for D.C., and she previously served as a member of the United States Sentencing Commission. She was appointed back in December of 2017. So her ruling here, she said, quote, she didn't say, quote, excuse me, the court ruling states, quote, Judge Friedrich ruled Biden is unlikely to succeed on the merits because the Privacy Act does not clearly bar disclosure, and the Department of Justice reasonably concluded that the public interest in records relied on by her outweighs Biden's diminished privacy interests after redactions. Because Biden giving the interview publicly to just a random guy to do the book, it's not as though Biden was doing an official report to a closed-door session of Congress. Biden found a random author, said, hey, write my memoir, and the guy came out and then sat down and did a bunch of recording with Biden. Biden then chose to say a bunch of things he wasn't allowed to say and reference a bunch of things he was not allowed to reference and give the memoir author a lot of things he was not allowed to give the memoir author. So play stupid things, win stupid prizes. There really are a couple of court cases right now that are being advocated on behalf of by different law groups. For example, of course, the Oversight Project has filed several motions, obviously the Heritage Foundation as well. One of the other groups who's been doing a lot lately to try to keep transparency open on prior administrations would be the Alliance Defending Freedom. Because over the last 250 years, America has been the bastion of freedom. And as we look ahead to the next 250, we're reminded that freedom is ours to defend. This kind of stuff is not defended on its own. Consistent court battles, endless fights, to keep our rights protected. That's the kind of thing that the Alliance Defending Freedom, who is a proud sponsor of the show, we are proud to have them. They stand in courtrooms across the country to protect those freedoms that we cherish: life, free speech, religious freedom, parental rights. These freedoms are at the core of who we are as a nation, and they must be preserved. Now, the Alliance Defending Freedom is approaching a critical fiscal year-end fundraising deadline. Your support today helps the ADF defend these freedoms so that they may endure for many years to come. So do me a favor, head over to joinadf.com/Tony or text Tony, Tony, to 83848. Every dollar that you give will be doubled thanks to a special matching grant while funds last. So again, that's joinadf.com/Tony or text Tony, Tony, to 83848. And again, a huge thank you to them for sponsoring the show. One of the things that they have been very consistent on over at the ADF has been bringing Anthony Fauci to accountability. And as Tulsi Gabbard leaves the department, leaves her role as the director of national intelligence, this all brings us down to her promise before she goes to take care of her, to be with and to take care of her husband, who is obviously struggling with a very advanced form of cancer. Tulsi Gabbard had the opportunity to go before the American people and say, I'm going to try to release as much as possible on things like, for example, Dr. Anthony Fauci and what he actually did during COVID. Because the allegations have been flying around for years and there have been little bits and pieces and leaks. It is a phenomenal release from her office, and we're going to get into those. So I believe that for Tulsi Gabbard, I want to make sure that I get this right. This is clip 24. Check it out.
Before the COVID pandemic, Dr. Fauci, as head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, provided millions in U.S. taxpayer dollars to fund dangerous gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, work which is now widely viewed as the source of the unintentional lab leak that sparked the pandemic. Now, in support of President Trump's maximum transparency mandate, today, on my final day as Director of National Intelligence, I'm releasing never-before-seen communications and documents that expose exactly how Fauci worked with politicized career leadership in the intelligence community to suppress the truth about his actions, the virus's lab leak origins, and his role in directing U.S. funding for this dangerous research that caused immeasurable harm and countless lost lives. Now, these documents expose Fauci's direct role in influencing and manipulating IC assessments on COVID-19.
Where have we heard this before? Where have we heard this before? So intelligence community assessments. All right, you have the director of national intelligence. Again, Tulsi Gabbard's role right now, the president of the United States, is holding up her replacement and confirming the next in line because of some legislative stuff that we'll talk about in just a couple of minutes here. But what Gabbard is talking about here, when you have intelligence agents or directors, I should say, of the CIA, of the NSA, of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, several other intelligence and intelligence adjacent agencies. So, for example, there's like an IRS investigation task force. There's a USDA investigation group. These individuals who are in charge of these organizations or their deputy chiefs will create a brief for the president of the United States. And it is the director of national intelligence's role to take a lot of these things together and then to provide recommendations and assessments and basically kind of like a brief to the president. So during the end of the Obama administration, James Comey and John Brennan of the FBI and the CIA, respectively, had an intelligence community report, an assessment that said Russia is covering for Hillary Clinton and they are not covering for Donald Trump. Russia knows that Hillary Clinton is a crazy bipolar nutcase who was taking Quaaludes because she flies off the handle at everyone. She's essentially like Katie Porter, but on actual steroids, or Quaaludes in this case. And so Russia was hiding that information. And there were some suspicions about business connections. And Donald Trump, they weren't hiding anything about, and they were actively trying to foster a bunch of crazy, like half-bit information. So they essentially, the Obama administration suggested, well, we have to flip this around. And so they edited and they altered the intelligence community assessment. And then going forward, that was a huge problem for Trump during his first administration. at the end of Trump's first administration during the COVID pandemic, what Tulsi Gabbard is alleging here, well, not alleging, these communications and these reports clearly articulate, is that Anthony Fauci worked with several members of these same intelligence communities that had not been scooped out and cleaned out by the Trump administration in their first term, or in his first term, and then edited some of the intelligence assessments in order to try to fool President Trump during the initial COVID-19 response so that he would make different moves, and then tried to change the record regarding things that Anthony Fauci was responsible for, which it appears, again, as many have made far more clear than I am doing right now, that Anthony Fauci had a direct hand in funding and working on the kinds of research that led to either a planned or an accidental leak from labs causing the COVID-19 coronavirus.
And how Fauci lied to Congress in 2024 when under oath he denied knowledge of or participation in discussions with intelligence officials about viral research. We also received testimony from multiple intelligence community whistleblowers who reported retaliation for challenging the intelligence community's manipulation of intelligence on the virus's origins. Once again, revealing a clear pattern of suppressing dissent, silencing critics, and burying the truth. Dr. Fauci's close relationships with the intelligence community enabled him to assume three key roles that shield him from scrutiny. First, Dr. Fauci funded dangerous gain-of-function coronavirus research linked to Big Pharma and their pursuit of universal vaccines.
Now, is this in and of itself illegal? No. But Fauci later went on to answer under oath that he had nothing to do with this and wasn't a part of it. That would be lying. That would be the perjury part. You're not allowed to do that. That is a big no. So that would be the first thing there. And this is going to be relevant because I do want to be clear about Joe Biden's kind of sort of unconditional and full pardon and whether or not the president of the United States actually has the authority to do that. We'll get into it.
Worth trillions of dollars. Second, Dr. Fauci was the behind-the-scenes advisor who, alongside his hand-picked so-called experts, pushed the intelligence community to endorse a natural animal origin to hide his dangerous gain-of-function research that he funded using taxpayer dollars, all of this in a deliberate attempt to cover up the truth and shift the blame and attention away from Fauci's own actions. Third, Dr. Fauci became the nation's pandemic pundit, and he publicly pushed lies, disinformation, and censorship using every platform available. Now, according to hundreds of reviewed emails, which are included in this release, the intelligence community almost always incorporated Fauci's recommendations. He promoted a fraudulent paper whose publication he helped prompt as legitimate information for intelligence community consideration. Senior analysts praised Dr. Fauci not as a policymaker, but as what they called an unbiased guide to the real coronavirus experts, while deliberately ignoring experts who might dissent from Fauci's narratives. Now, Fauci didn't stop there. He blatantly lied to Congress under oath during his 2024 testimony to the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic, denying that he ever spoke to any intelligence agency about COVID. Now, the correspondence I'm releasing today directly contradicts his sworn testimony. Now, we received statements from multiple whistleblowers revealing that the intelligence analysts who dared to challenge Dr. Fauci's COVID origin conclusions faced threats of retaliation, marginalization, and many suffered career setbacks.
Now, again, so many of these things so far, there's a difference between the fact that, Fauci is a piece of trash and is a scumming individual, and the individuals inside government agencies, the civil servants, who are there forever, do in fact act just like others in corporate America. They are just as catty, they are just as ridiculous as a lot of the self-obsessed white-collar industry is.
For example, a contractor was terminated just days after coming forward to ODNI as a whistleblower. Another example, those who advocated for the lab leak hypothesis or expressed dissenting views were reminded by their managers that leadership would determine which analysts would be promoted and which would not. The message was clear: go along or be punished. Senior leaders also sought to undermine whistleblowers by removing anonymity, which is required in the whistleblower process, as they made their complaints, and also insisting that their managers or attorneys be present during ODNI meetings where these whistleblowers were coming forward with their testimony.
Again, nothing here yet alleged on the illegal side, and there is some illegal side stuff. We'll get to that.
Of our fellow Americans and countless people around the world. Now, after years of lies and censorship and cover-ups, the American people deserve transparency, truth, and accountability. The tactics that were used to hide the truth are straight from the deep state playbook.
Okay, so now she's just going to give the rationale and the analysis. So what actually in here is definitively and curiously so on the illegal side. So there are a series of documents that are released, again, with some redactions in this particular document series here. Some of the paperwork that is released essentially lays out the groundwork to point out that the intelligence community kind of propped Donald Trump up to have a call with Zelensky that would lead to his impeachment. So there are some things here. Essentially, the foreign policy manipulation of the president of the United States would be a violation of the Espionage Act. That would also be high treason. You can't do that. That's not a thing that one can do. The idea that they were going to set the president of the United States up so that if he has a conversation with members of the Ukrainian government and essentially giving him a false assessment piece of data. This is the problem. In the documents released by Tulsi Gabbard, there are allegations from members of the intelligence community at the time that Donald Trump was dangerous. And so therefore, what the intelligence community had to do was lie to the president in their intelligence community assessment and then send him off to talk with the Ukrainian government. Which means this, the president of the United States was essentially goose-stepped into the weird impeachment quid pro quo nonsense that would arise. Now, you may recall the individuals who had plotted to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. And the reason that they were let off the hook is the FBI had individuals who fed them the idea, fed the 3%ers in Michigan, the idea of going and kidnapping Gretchen Whitmer. So what we're seeing here is essentially that the intelligence community, again, through these documents that are alleging that Trump was set up to go in and ask for some kind of a quid pro quo here with the Ukrainians, which, by the way, is still the president's State Department right. That's not an impeachable offense. The president is the primary broker of state matters on behalf of the entire world. That's a precedent set by George Washington when his Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, wanted to intervene in the French Revolution, and George Washington said no. So the purview of the United States is the president, what he says goes. We are not a bureaucratic managed presidency of overrulement in the fourth state, no matter what Woodrow Wilson would like to believe. So where does this actually go? Because Joe Biden, or should I say the Otto pen, issued a broad preemptive pardon to Anthony Fauci on January 19th, 2025. So like the very last thing Biden did in his massive sweep of pardoning anybody, everybody, anyone that he could find, granted a full and unconditional pardon for Anthony Fauci for, quote, any offenses against the United States which, and then in brackets Fauci, may have committed or taken part during the period from January 1st, 2014 through the date of this pardon arising from or in any manner related to his service as Director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force or the White House COVID-19 Response Team, or Chief Medical Advisor to the President. And a lot of individuals pointed out it was really weird that the start date for his pardon was January 1st, 2014. This is when you start to see a lot of the intelligence community making some kinds of plans and assessments regarding a possible entry by a next Republican administration. Essentially, the administrative state bracing itself to keep whatever Republican was elected, be he Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or Donald Trump, from really operating effectively. And that's what Gabbard is referencing there by the end of the deep state. Now, here's the fun part. So while Senator Rand Paul and House Republicans have pushed for investigations into, all kinds of various crimes that you could have alleged that Fauci's committed, and we've gone over those before, because no charges have ever been filed against Fauci before, the pardon is proactive rather than remedial. And herein lies the fun. So there is an idea. Only really twice in the country's history have we ever seen a presidential preemptive pardon. So preemptive blanket pardons, only 2 of them ever. So one after the Civil War, meaning if you promise to serve the United States, anyone who committed any kind of wrongs against the United States as a U.S. citizen is granted kind of a full pardon. That kind of post-presidential pardon, that's the first because it was somewhat preemptive, but it was really just an expansive blanket pardon. The first preemptive kind of full and unconditional pardon, of course, came on September 8th, 1974, in which President Gerald Ford issued a full and unconditional preemptive pardon to his predecessor, Richard Nixon. That's Proclamation 4311. Now, here's the fun part. Although a Michigan court ended up ruling, because this was challenged pretty quickly after, so in the official record here, while the U.S. Supreme Court never ended up ruling on this, Murphy versus Ford in 1975, a Michigan attorney named Gregory Murphy, filed a lawsuit against Gerald Ford, seeking a declaratory judgment to void Nixon's unconditional pardon, which, by the way, was correct. It was correct. Now, do I think that Nixon was really stiffed and kind of, stood up in a lot of manners? Yes, I do. But does that mean that the Gerald Ford 4311 proclamation was legal? No, that's not a thing. The founding fathers did not envision the Article 2 authority of the President of the United States to issue pardons means that you get to issue a sweeping magical fairy wand, anything you may have done. You're not Jesus. The only individual who has the ability to grant a full and unconditional pardon to anything that you have done, are doing, and maybe will have done would be Christ himself. That's a religious matter. An executive does not have the authority under the legislated laws and governing bodies to grant a pardon in the future. Why? Because, well, realistically, the theory behind the executive rule comes from the idea that under the parliamentary procedure, the Robert's Rules of Order, how actual legal arguments are set and descripted, when you say things and when you do things matter, because dates and times matter. It's a very Greco-Roman and Christian tradition. And it came as a response to the kind of absolutist monarchical rule. The idea is that you are governed by the rules of time and action, meaning when you do things and what you do during that time matters. So the Michigan court struck it down, which was insane. The U.S. District Court for Western District of Michigan flatly rejected the entire lawsuit, ruling that President Ford was completely within his constitutional rights under Article 2, Section 2, suggesting that because Andrew Johnson, after the Civil War, issued broad pardons to former Confederates, that's the exact same thing as saying if Nixon, I'm picking a random crime here, if Nixon jaywalked in San Fran, outside the federal building, so it can be a federal crime, he jaywalks, and because it's full and unconditional, that means that you can't apply that. Nope, that's not what that means. Confederates, there were a series of crimes that it was suspected Confederates had committed, like high treason, for example. And so Andrew Johnson issuing a pardon, it wasn't unconditional. It wasn't. In the denotative or the connotative, President Andrew Johnson issued a conditional pardon. If you lay down your weapons and you stop, you can come back. Gerald R. Ford just said, you know what, for the good of the nation, total and unconditional pardon. Nope. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that it is very, very likely that before the end of the Trump administration, you see this preemptive pardon situation brought before the Supreme Court of the United States. I do not believe that the Michigan court, and don't just take this from me, Chief Justice John Roberts of the Supreme Court, Captain Moderate himself, has made it pretty clear he doesn't believe that this is going to be something that sticks around until the end of time. It can't. And so the idea that Biden can just say, from this day to this day, whatever. No. Fauci demonstrated a specific and series of crimes, and just because someone, comes up and says, you rubbed the lamp, what do you need? No, the president is not a genie. That's not how it works. And if other matters of constitutional authority by the president of the United States are held based on, or I should say held in check, based on certain measures that are not just illustrated in the document itself, but in early American precedent, that's going to extend to the Article 2 court stuff anyway. Besides, one of the judges that was part of kind of the deliberation in that Western Michigan course, we ended up finding out later that he had committed a very serious form of plagiarism, I think in 52. So Now, as a quick reminder here on the end of this Fauci stuff, the other reason that there needs to be accountability and that this man needs to be tried is because we're still existing in a world in which there are a lot of individuals who have never, ever, 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 ever been held accountable for doing this exact crap and fawning over St. Fauci.
You are seen to many as a superhero, but you are a human being, and you've been working nonstop since all of this began, communicating with the public, trying to get a handle on this pandemic in terms of the science. So how do you keep yourself going in the face of all of this death and disease?
You know, Dana, it's really just focusing on the enormity of the problem and the fact that I do have a role in the response to this problem. And whenever that happens, you've got to focus like a laser beam on what the goal is to end this terrible outbreak that we're going through. And I don't really, you don't have time for feeling sorry for yourself that you're tired or that you feel like you just got to suck it up, as it were. I use that because that's what it feels like sometimes. But that's what you do. You got to realize that here we are in this country and in this world with so many people who are suffering and dying from this terrible scourge that we're under. So let's just get it over with. And when you do that, you just focus and go for it. And everything else becomes secondary.
Well, that's very good advice. Certainly healthcare workers are doing that in hospitals across the country as we speak. And we appreciate your...
Do you know what this reminds me of? What that kind of like, how do you do it, Anthony Fauci? How do you, there was a Golden Globe speech that Jim Carrey addressed not too long ago, where again, people mock this kind of, how do you do it? How do you possibly make things happen? How do you do it?
Thank you. I am two-time Golden Globe winner Jim Carrey. When I go to sleep at night, I'm not just a guy going to sleep. I'm two-time Golden Globe winner Jim Carrey going to get some well-needed shut-eye. And when I dream, I don't just dream any old dream. No, sir. I dream about being three-time Golden Globe winning.
So again, people understand that this kind of self-gratifying nonsense, I mean, the real issue here is a credibility issue. It is. There is a big portion of this that is credibility, that just like covering up Joe Biden's ailing mental evaporation, there were indeed a number of individuals who simply said that because Anthony Fauci was who he was and was super duper great, that he couldn't make mistakes. And so they brought him on and they did a lot of smoochy kissing. Oh, you're so wonderful. Oh, you're so wonderful, Anthony Fauci. Oh, you're so great. Oh, this kind of garbage. Yeah, the sycophancy, it leaves a pretty nasty taste in the mouths of American. And it's not, it hasn't continued. It really hasn't. Now, this is going to be quite the segue here. But this brings us, of all places, over to the Iranian MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, the memo of, we're going to do that, which is failing, and it's failing catastrophically. There are a number of right-wing accounts online that are very, very, very obsessed with giving a lot of smoochy kisses and ultimate praise of the same kind that the media gave to Anthony Fauci right now to people who are saying very, very dumb things in public. And I don't care for that. I don't care for that. And now, again, I also think that the infinite pearl clutching and the crying that, oh, it's all over and it's terrible and it's compromised, I think that's just as silly. But I've said from the very, very, very beginning that all of the people who rush to tell you immediately as soon as, oh, there's going to be a deal, it's over, oh, it's amazing. And then all of the people who come to tell you that it's all over, oh, we're going to die, it's terrible, oh, it's awful.
I didn't like any of that.
That kind of crap. Both of those individuals, both of those categories are completely and utterly retarded. Now, I said this before at the time, the actual terms of the MOU are nonsensical, right down to the baseline. Because, first of all, they have to be ratified by the United Nations, which ain't happening. Number two, they involve a bunch of actors who didn't sign onto the deal. Like, they didn't have their little representatives there to sign. So it doesn't work. Number three, It involves a bunch of if-sos, maybes, and how-tos in the most vague document ever. It's garbage. It's garbage. Now, I made the case, and then there were some very, very, very angry libs that made this case, that I said that there's a lot of this that is really a lot of bluffing. And it's bluffing a couple of people. And again, here on the show, I try to give you exactly what it is that we think and the data on it and the speculation to make it very, very clear. The United States, through the Trump administration right now, appears to be bluffing two groups of people. Number one, there is a bluffing of the international commodities and oil market to suggest that this is all over and the economy can recover and it's all going to be fine and wonderful. This is the exact same kind of bluff that Trump has made whenever he has wanted to get the oil market to sink lower. Number two, he is bluffing the American people. He is. He's bluffing the American people. Oh, maybe this is some kind of, the elections are coming up. That is what the president has said. You know, that's kind of the argument that he has made before. And I don't really think that either of the bluffs is paying off. I don't. So as far as that's concerned, do I think that this bluff is working at this point in time? No, but that is the bluff that's being played. The first Trump administration did the same kind of bluffing. Trump and his administration have done the same kind of bluffing in this administration so far. Some of it to great success, some of it to not so much success. Even the Obama administration in its State Department played the bluffing game a little bit here. That's what's going on. Now, I will say this. I have made it clear before that the vice president of the United States has often been the guy that Donald Trump would kind of trot out to say things that would sound a lot more friendly to the enemy actor. And then as soon as the enemy actor is distracted with Vance, then Trump hits hard. We saw that with Venezuela. We've seen that with several other times and places before, including with the original Iranian strike on the Isfahan nuclear facility, for example, back last year. And then again this year when Operation Epic Fury began. That stuff said, yeah, some of the stuff that Vance is out there saying right now, it's not good, Bob. There is a way too online group in this administration who is spending time just like going after each and every critic. Now, I don't agree with that strategy. I guess I don't have to. But just kind of doing a lot of like awkward flailing and lashing. Here's the vice president doing a little bit of that. Again, I like JD. I think he's a good guy. We have a lot of the same background. But I don't know about this one, Chief.
What I will say, and this does bother me, is that you've seen people within Bibi's cabinet who have come out and attacked the deal, and in some ways very personally attacked the President of the United States. And I guess my message to them would be twofold. Number one, Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world's superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world. And the second message I would give to some of those cabinet members, Bibi, to his credit, has not gone down this path, but to some of these cabinet members in Israel who are attacking the President of the United States, the other thing that I would say is that over the last 3 months, 2/3 of the defensive weapons that have protected your homeland have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump. And anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the President of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation.
Bad phrase to end on. The wake up and smelling the reality. My dude, I don't necessarily think so. So first of all, just as a fact, kind of like keeping the facts in front, I went and looked for the Israeli cabinet officials. And I even went to like the fringe outlets. Like I went and looking like, oh, well, maybe this is an off the record comment and this was just reported to one person. Maybe that. Nope, not there. I can't find them who have been out there saying that, oh, Donald Trump's the problem. There have been some people who say they don't like the deal, which is fine. You're allowed to not like the deal. But like, I'm looking for the Israelis that are like, oh, Donald Trump's awful and he's betrayed, like in the cabinet of Netanyahu, in the Israeli government. I'm not seeing them. I've argued in Israel against some of these people and I used some very unfriendly words doing so. I looked for them. I looked. I didn't see it. I didn't see it. What is a little weird here is that you have two different parts of the administration. You have Rubio and Hegseth, who are rather on the hawkish side of things. And again, which is not a neocon. There is no George Bushian, Nikki Haley, and neocons like that I know of that are serving in this administration whatsoever. We've looked for them. They're not there. Not that we know of. No. And then there's the isolationist crew. Now, again, I just think that's a really, really weird thing to say. When it's so easily refutable, when it's so easily to go out there, why get up in front of people and say things? You don't have to. Sometimes less is a little bit more. So then Vance sat down and did an interview with a friend of mine over at CBN. Just a little, again, I personally don't recommend it. Again, I really do like JD. There was a bobblehead of JD that I was given that is right up at the top left of my screen. Also because I've kind of been called the doppelganger of the vice presidents before, and that's kind of a running joke around here. But that doesn't mean that he's immune to making some mistakes at times, at least from where I'm seeing. So here's kind of the same kind of questions and just answers that are just unhelpful.
There are going to be folks, and you've heard the critics, obviously, that say, look, finish the job, right? And I know you're saying finish the job. They're not saying an endless quagmire, though you suggest that maybe that's exactly what they're saying. But we had him on the ropes. The question is, why not finish the job? It's kind of like a weed in your backyard. You kill 90% of the weeds, but if you don't get the root of the problem, the weeds are growing back.
Yeah, so I understand that argument. And what I would say is, what is additional military action, which is always on the table? We can always do that. Sure. What does additional military action accomplish for us right now? We could kill more of their leadership, but you're going to have additional leadership below that. You could cause more destruction to their economy, right? We could do that. We've already caused probably $1 trillion of destruction to their industrial base and so forth. But fundamentally, unless the people who run the country change their behavior over the long term, you're always going to have this problem. It's kind of a thorn in the side of the United States of America. And so what we're seeing is we're going to pause here. We're going to open the straits, relieve some pressure on the world economy, lower energy prices, and see if this group of Iranians that are running the country, they say that they want to do things differently. Let's give them that opportunity. If they do, great. And if they don't, we can always go back to the other options.
Okay, so two things here that are very, very fair. And then we're going to get to some of the updates that literally make none of this at all matter, except the kind of future directives and decisions here. So thing number one is the idea that they're magically and suddenly trustworthy is no. The question that was asked to the vice president is this going to be a thorn in the side? So why not deal with it? And the response from the vice president is, well, that option's always on the table. That is true. That is correct. Correct. Now, to make this perfectly clear, though the United States at the beginning in this particular conflict retains a series of options, that does not mean all options are good all the time on the table. All right? So one of the things that the United States can do right now is, in fact, yes, let some pressure off on the Strait of Hormuz, try to get Iran to play nicely for a while, try to lower things down, and then see where things are going. Now, that's already fallen apart now at 8:38 p.m. Eastern time on Friday, June the 19th. It's already falling apart as of now. Trip to Switzerland for the vice president's been canceled. Rubio is now being sent over to the Gulf states, to give you a little teaser. That's where we're going. It's already over. It's done. It's done. Now, Trump is saying, 60 days. That's what he's posting. 60 days now. And okay. On that 700 Club interview, and I've done interviews with David quite a bit. I on a morning show of all places. Love him to death. And he's a wonderful man. You could tell he was in a rough spot. And one of the reasons that he is in a rough spot is that those on the right who have criticized the administration's decisions here have found themselves targeted by members in charge of the White House's social media accounts, which is not helpful. It's not helpful. It's not. There seems to be a growing trend here on the right side of the aisle where if there is someone who criticizes the president and his administration, and they are from the populist isolationist side, and they say, well, maybe he's the Antichrist, then he doesn't get slapped. And it's all very, well, I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about that. But then if there is someone on a different part of the right who says, I don't really think that kind of trusting the Iranians here is a good idea. And then the administration is like, they're dumb. Psh, how about you let us drive? That kind of gives off a little bit of a bad comm strategy. Don't recommend it. I don't recommend it. Now, again, I came out on Tuesday evening and, the other panelists were not exactly pleased when I said there's a lot of bluffing that's going on here, and so I'm going to wait to see where things land. And then I saw all of the open source intelligence accounts saying, wow, looks like Trump wasn't kidding. All of the aircraft tankers are gone from the region. Well, now there's a bunch that are back. And it does appear that a lot of this is falling apart. Now, to be clear, right up at the front, another small fact check before we leave. Vance also making his point, and that's I just don't. It's such a pointless mistake. Donald Trump is the only world leader who likes Israel. There are like 30 that we could name readily right here. In our own hemisphere, you have, again, at times, you have the Argentinian government, you have the Canadian government, again, at times is for the Canadians. You also have a couple of other South American governments, a lot of European governments, you have a lot of Asian governments, you have a lot of African governments that have expressed support. Don't be dumb. Don't do this. Don't do this kind of a thing. It's unnecessary. Don't make statements that can be easily refuted. That's so unhelpful. And then to immediately have the deal fall apart because shocker, breaker, not trustworthy, is very, very much not helpful at all. Very, very much, again, I just don't recommend it. Now, that said, let's actually get to the Rubio statement at this right before he heads off to the Gulf states. He was also interviewed this afternoon.
The Iranian foreign minister, what he said at the UN Human Rights Commission, accusing the U.S. and Israel of genocide, essentially.
The Iranian. So Ghalibaf, from the parliament, got up in front of the world and said, well, we won this victory and Israel and the United States are genociding everyone and everything and all that kind of crap. Here was Rubio's response to that.
Israel of genocide, essentially.
The Iranian. Oh, okay. Well, he's an expert in genocide. They're experts in that because, they sponsor terrorism all over the world. And they've killed thousands and thousands of people. Look at the Middle East. Look at the Middle East, guys. Every problem in the Middle East tracks back to Iran. Hezbollah, Iran. Shia militias that are destroying and threatening Iraq, Iran. Hamas, Iran. The Houthis, Iran. Assad when he was in Syria, Iran. Everywhere you turn, they're behind all of it.
It's a level-headed approach. Now, that brings us over to some of the updates right now because President Trump also sat down, and had a conversation with the Axios podcast today. And he's kind of saying some like mealy kind of wishy-washy stuff about like the Iranian leadership. But he's making it clear if the Iranians do not play along, we'll bomb the hell out of them. Now, believe it or not, there is a dispensationalist argument for this. So for those of you who may not, kind of have a little bit of the idea here, there is a fun argument on the Christian side of the calendar here, in which there is a doctrine called dispensationalism. Dispensationalism is the idea that God has attempted to reach man by a progressively greater and stronger manner through the ages. So like first he gave man a conscience, and then he gave man the structure of family, and then he gave man the structure of government, and then he gave man the Messiah, and then there's the age of the church in which you have an entire group who is promoting Christ. And it's like there's this escalation of ways that God tries to reach man. And eventually you have the tribulation and signs and wonders that try to bring men to Christ. And then finally, Christ himself comes back to earth, reigns for 1,000 years, and it's like, and still men reject Christ, being kind of like the escalation. So why do I bring that up here? You could make the argument. You could. And I'm not saying this is the case. I'm saying that there is a possibility to read it this way. This would get into the playing 4D chess kind of category. I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm just going to tell you how this could look. There could be a bit of a dispensationalist kind of escalation here, meaning Donald Trump said, well, first of all, we're going to give them the option to just be decent. And they're not going to do that. Well, then we're going to position our military off the coast. And then we're going to strike their nukes and see if that makes them any more compliant. Well, then we're going to go ahead and strike their economy and see if that makes them any more compliant. Well, then we're going to get them to the world table and say, well, you want a deal? You want a hands off the Hormuz thing just to prove that Iran, in the most rational circumstances on earth, is not willing to act like human beings from their regime's perspective. They're not even able to act like, grown men. If that's the case that's being made, sure. Maybe. Do I believe that? No, that's an interpretation that I've seen over the last couple of weeks that I think, again, you're kind of pushing it. So where's everyone headed? Well, Vance was supposed to head to Switzerland to talk directly with Ghalibaf. That was going to be a really bad photo op because the dude just got done killing 40,000 of his own people. Well, now they're sending Steve Witkoff as of an hour ago over to Switzerland for the first stage of nuclear talk. Not happening. It ain't. No. It's collapsing as we speak. Why? Well, because Iran is still trying to charge tolls. They're still, as of right now, firing at boats. And they've already cited the fact that Israel and Hezbollah are still exchanging fire in southern Lebanon as like everything's already off the table. Which people aren't going to, toddle along for that for very long. Now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is currently planning on traveling to Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain next week. The U.S. sources are telling Axios. So what do I actually see? Eventually, the president is going to have to land on. Let me actually find the exact statement here. According to Saul Sadka, he says the good news about Vance botching the ceasefire extension, or the MOU, because he just couldn't resist sticking it to his enemies, Israel and the neocons, instead of actually selling the deal, is that it means that Donald Trump's only way to save his foreign policy legacy is either to pose with the Iranian uranium or end the IRGC. Now, why do I say that? Well, because 3 hours ago, the White House posted this, quote, Iran is finished. Why? Because Donald Trump said just today, quote, we didn't meet out of desperation. Iran did. They are finished, and finished is in all caps. We'll play out the next 60 days. They get no money, not 10 cents. I told you this before. Iran's not going to play along. It turns out that, like the whole Islamic fundamentalist thing, not rational actors. And so Trump has now been truly, yes, he's boxed into a corner. He's been boxed into a corner by individuals that are on his team. Donald Trump hates that. He does. To be clear, he doesn't care for that. Vance has boxed him into a corner. Again, I like the vice president of the United States. I think he's a great guy. I do. I think that, he's an excellent family man. He is one of my more favorite Catholics. And to that end, obviously having kind of a shared background, not just like the Middletown, Indiana versus Middletown, Ohio thing, families both from Kentucky, growing up in a broken home, that kind of stuff. I love the vice president. However, the way that the vice president did a PR strategy here, I'm sorry, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you it was a great rollout. It wasn't. I think that the president of the United States has done a pretty great job in this administration. However, having Rubio, who is, again, the most popular member of the administration, and it's not even close, against Vance, who is just saying, oh, maybe they're turning over a new leaf.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
At this point, the president of the United States will either pose with the collected uranium dust, or the IRGC will have to be finished. It'll have to be. We are now here. And this was always the argument from the beginning. If you're going to do the job, do the job. Don't do any half-assed, goofy nonsense. Don't do it. Don't waste our time with like a little bit over here and a little bit over there. Do it. And finish and commit. Either wage war in the Old Testament style, where nothing is left standing, or don't get involved in the first place. There's an irony here that the isolationist perspective here is rather neoconservative. The isolationist perspective here is, we'll just treat them as actors who want democracy just like everyone else, and they're rational and friendly. No. Didn't work for George W. Bush. It didn't work for his dad when we should have finished Saddam Hussein off back in the Gulf War. And it ain't going to work now. So, just to be completely clear, I do. And again, you don't have to agree with me, that Trump's been backed into a corner. I say the same thing like when Bondi made some wild arguments and said some things in front of Congress that weren't good about, Kristi Noem about funding her own commercial on horseback, or Pam Bondi also saying things and getting the president ticked off. Trump doesn't like to be put in difficult situations by people on his team. You say, Tony, how do you know this? The man had an entire television series about how he runs a corporation and the people that he likes to see promoted. All right. And the man's literally famous for going, "You're fired. Don't need you anymore." And that's my personal take here. So those things all said and aside, I know it's 8:50 and it's kind of the end of the week. We didn't really have enough time to get through absolutely everything. I will leave you with just one thing because, there may be some news over the weekend. I should also mention, because I've forgotten, thank you very much for the kind birthday wishes on the Tuesday episode. That was really nice. I saw a lot of comments. Thank you guys very much. That was very sweet of you. And on that other side as well, at the dailysignal.com, the merch store for all the Daily Signal stuff, that's back open. And the stuff's in stock and you can order things. So if you want to do that for some reason, you can now go dailysignal.com and grab that stuff. There you go. That's the only add-on that you can need. the last thing that I've been waiting to share with you is Joy Reid. Because, there's also been some drama about Michelle Obama and the UFC fighter who called her a man and, Big Mike and all that stuff. My favorite part of the victimhood culture is that today the argument was made on Joy Reid's podcast that if you make fun of Michelle Obama, you are giving all black women heart disease. Here you go.
I felt my heart having palpitations. I felt my chest tighten. I felt personally humiliated as a black woman, as First Lady Michelle Obama is. And then it took me immediately, Joy, to the data that we have. We literally have data that systemic racism, chronic discrimination, and also public humiliation, we have data that these things increase cardiovascular negative outcomes. And as I sat there experiencing those emotions, I know I'm not alone. I realized this is what happens. This is why so many Black people and Black women specifically have poorer cardiovascular outcomes when compared to other ethnic groups. This is why so many of us.
No, it's not. So the reason, so her argument here is just incredible. She said, I sat there getting heart palpitations watching the UFC fighter call Michelle Obama a man. No. That is not why she's saying here that Black people have more cardiovascular health issues. No. As I used to tell my students at Lawrence North in Indianapolis, I made it very clear. If you are in my classroom and you are Black, you are running a higher risk if you come from these ethnic pools for things like sickle cell anemia, for certain kinds of more easily gained hypertension and other muscular and cardiovascular issues, because they are more easily inherited. In the same way that different ethnic groups have general predispositions to certain kinds of diseases and struggles. Yes, those are the way the genes are passed down, the way things are closely related to each other. And telling people that the way to solve Black women having heart palpitations is like, don't ever tease a Black woman. No. That is beyond medical disinformation. I will grab this biology high school textbook and I will smack you across the face with it. And then, I'll pray for you, because man, you're gonna need the good Lord in heaven for help being that dumb. Excellent, incredible. Yeah, there is a treatment now for sickle cell. Yeah, it is quite again, certain things are in fact genetically prevalent. So that said and aside, there are a couple of mail time questions. I know it's late. I know it's a Friday here. I told you we're going to do a little extra show to make up for the fact we didn't have a lot of shows this week and that there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. So just for you, that's right, you indeed, we're going to do just a smidgen, just a teeny bit of the good old mail time. All right, boys and girls here. Got to get that sound effect or I'm going to get emails. Mail time.
On the Tony Kinnett Cast.
So as a reminder, the best way to get a question in front of me, there's a little mail time channel on our Discord. There's a link to our Discord in the description. There you go. So from a question on June 16th that has definitely needed to be asked, it says, query, can the president actually remove sanctions from Iran or Cuba if he uses a carrot and stick deal with them as part of a deal? Wouldn't that have to be approved by Congress? No. Eventually, yes. The short answer, no. A lot of congressional sanctions are built with a presidential lever in place. So the president of the United States can, if something changes significantly, the president can say, I'm going to go ahead and flick the switch off, and then Congress can choose whether or not to turn the sanctions back on, and I sign them into law. So that is while the Congress can levy those sanctions or cement them into law, for example, regarding Cuba, no, the president of the United States, absolutely does have the ability and the authority to actually change a couple of things. Now, on the Cuba measure, we didn't even get a chance to talk about this. Cuba has now begun its largest economic reform since the 1959 revolution. So as far as the United States being a seriously kick-butt foreign policy maneuver, being strong and not playing patty cake footsie with like enemy regimes and just saying, change or you'll not be around anymore. The country's parliament unanimously has now approved, I love that, unanimously. You know why, come on. Unanimously approved radical reforms that provide for the privatization of the significant part of the economy. It provides for private real estate development, the creation of private banks, transformation of some state enterprises into commercial companies with shares, the easing of restrictions for private businesses. This would absolutely be, well, first of all, the turn towards the market was supported by Raul Castro, who really wants the United States to pardon him. Raul Castro knows that eventually the president of the United States is likely to send in a crew and snatch him like Nicolas Maduro. That's very, very possible. And so he's like, hey, you should, reform the economy. They're trying to China their way out of this. That is, again, to all of the communists out there who are weeping and mourning over Cuba, tossing aside large parts of communism, cry, cope, seethe. And I hope that if you're a communist that you find a lovely helicopter to jump out of. So that said and aside, another excellent question here, could just so happen to answer. From Steve, what are the odds that the recent tiff between Trump and Bibi are just a good cop, bad cop facade? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. And the reason why is that the president of the United States, very routinely, Israel and the United States operate more independently of each other than a lot give them credit for. The idea that the United States tells Israel what to do is like the number one accusation thrown at Bibi. So, for example, the political opposition to Bibi Netanyahu in Israel is that he is a puppet of Trump. And the political opposition to the president of the United States is that Trump is a puppet of Bibi, which is really freaking hilarious. No, if there is any good copping and bad copping going on, it's Vance and Rubio. And even then, I mean, if Vance was just being the good cop, that is some masterclass acting that we have witnessed over the last week. Masterclass in acting. And taking definitely one for the team by doing so, if that's the case. If that question were, and then also another from Marquis81, is it possible the MOU and the subsequent deal to come, which there is no subsequent deal coming, is it a way just for the administration to pause the fighting and allowing things to stabilize before the midterms, before November? This is the common theory, and not just the theory by, some of those on friendly side of the administration, those who are highly critical of the MOU as well, are suggesting it's just Trump trying to pause and heal the economy before November. I think there's a bit of that, yeah. The president has alleged openly that there's something to do with the midterms here. It's still really far out to kind of hope that everything will be fine before then. I don't know. I think that just because there is a theory doesn't mean, like, again, I don't actually subscribe to the whole, like, my dispensational analogy. I don't think so. I think there's a lot of, hey, see what happens, and not wanting to be called big, stinky, and mean. And I think the United States right now, I think that if you want to know, I'll be honest with you. You know what? Fine. I've tiptoed around this enough. I don't like tiptoeing around things. The reason the Trump administration is not finishing this is because American soldiers or Marines will die. To take a point in Iran, to go in and capture the uranium ourselves, which has now been moved from Isfahan in large part to Tehran. It will end with likely, at least I'd say on the soft end, like a dozen US soldiers, Marines, or sailors who are killed in action or are seriously maimed and injured. This is an administration who does not want that, that on their conscience. Absolutely. Understandably so. That would be a horrible tragedy. To perform a military action requires an understanding of the possible sacrifices afoot. And when it comes to a large-scale military intervention, especially against a foe like the Iranian regime, it is far more dangerous to allow the cancerous tumor to fester than it is to go in and to remove it right then and there. The soft-handed maybe it'll be fine thing never pans out. It's never once panned out ever. Never been a time that we've seen that. And by the way, that was, in fact, since we've talked about Nixon, that was Nixon's big mistake. He could have left it with just, well, we're going to use China against Russia. And by the end of by the time that Nixon had resigned, he was starting to get into the camp of, well, maybe we'll kind of open up and work with China a little bit. And that was kind of the mistake. A little optimistic there. Again, even though I think that Nixon's been maligned unfairly. So regarding the Trump administration, to take Carg Island, you are likely going to see between 10 and 100 U.S. troops that are killed. That's the answer. That's the actual honest to God. Just like when I talked to you about why the Save America Act isn't passing is because of like 5 or 6 senators. That's the reason here. Because then there would be a bunch of populists who would come out and would say that well, this is just like Iraq and Afghanistan. It's not. But those who have signed up for service have and I say that because just yesterday, I was talking with a friend of mine who is currently in an Air Force detachment. And I asked him very point blankly, like if he's worried about being sent into action. He said, it's why I signed up. That's a tough decision that will have to be made. There's nothing flippant about that. But if you want to know if that's what's actually holding him up on like the heart level, that's why Trump's not finishing it. There's your answer. There you go. That is just the way that is. Yeah, Trump will hit Iran harder after the midterms. I don't think it's I think there's a big aspect of that, but I just think that planning something like that out months in advance is a very dangerous game on the foreign policy front side of things. Another question here. Even if Fauci has federal immunity, couldn't an individual state convict him? Yes, and absolutely. Do I see that happening? Again, the crimes that Fauci committed were federal crimes. I'm not aware of many, if any, state statutes that could be grabbed him for. I would need to see that kind of an idea. I don't, I don't know. That said and aside, from Cowboy Rich, and I think this will probably be the last question unless there's any big huge fireballs of questions in the in the Slack side of things here, or not the Slack, the Discord side of things. What do you think the odds are that we go back into Iran with Rubio over there? I don't think I can answer that question because I am aware of the protocol and the math that's done when having an official overseas and the methods to get them back home. And I just don't think I don't think I can answer that one. Sorry. I'm trying to be transparent, but there are some things that I can't answer. Do I think that would radically change the policy? It could. Do I think that is a guarantee? Nope. So that stuff all said and aside. Oh, like a negligent homicide charge for Fauci? No, I don't think so. I just don't think so. Like that kind of like a manslaughter or a negligent homicide kind of a charge. I don't think there's any precedent that exists for that yet. I don't think that would be to prove that in court. I don't think you have a chance for that. Yeah. So those things all said and aside. Oh, I can't help this last one because I do love him on the chat. Jesus is not a man of war. Correct. He's the Son of God, but when he returns, he comes as a conqueror, and no longer, the next time Christ comes, it's as a judge and a conqueror. So, that fun little side of things said, I think that's kind of the end of the show for today. Have an excellent weekend. If there's any big breaking news, we'll be back sooner than that. A like and subscribe would help us out tremendously. We appreciate y'all very much. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.